Alright, this is going to be a weekly recap from the 28th of November to the 2nd day of December, and I absolutely do not look forward to this, but I'm going to have to do it, and ideally, I can look back at this week and say, wow, I'm glad I kept going, because honestly, right now, really jaded in terms of the setups, because I traded a lot of setups very well, they just didn't work out, so I had to take an L, and then there were a lot of setups that I didn't take, I hesitated on trading, and they worked out perfectly. And then there were a few that did work out perfectly in terms of the setup, but I traded horribly. So I felt like I did everything wrong, and just really jaded from it. I did manage to squeeze out $2.81. So all of this week's work, $2.81. I mean, I guess it wasn't red, but man, that just really sucks. Just hope I can do better next week. I had a total of, oh, and actually, let me update this to the 28th. I had not eight, 10 trades. Four of them were green, crappy winning percentage rate, but at least my average dollar gain was higher than my average dollar loss, as well as my average percent gain. So maybe that's why I was able to squeeze out a tiny profits. Let's just go ahead and go over the trades one by one. Starting with CRTD on the 28th, which is when I closed the position, but this was a swing trade. I was in the 25th, which was a Friday. So let's actually look back a little further. Um, yeah, starting on the 25th with CRTD. All right, 25th is going to be right here. And let's see if I can actually manage to do this where I can look at longer than 5 days. At least I don't really have it configured like that. Let me just try to make one very quickly. Alright, let's look at the 25th, which is going to be right here this day. And I'll also try to get to the 25th right here, which is going to be this day as well. Right here. This first setup, a little longer to go over just because of the fact it was a swing trade. This was a support hold swing trade. So I was in at November the 25th at 109.5, and this was at 10:32 a.m. So let's look at 10:32 a.m. at 109.5. Right here is when I got in at 10:32 at 109.5. So I got in right around here. And why did I get in this? Well, I liked how it kind of dropped to this $1 support level. It broke below it a little bit right here, and then now it was kind of holding it, and then this was the next day. And I also thought it was breaking like an overall downtrending trend line off of these two candles, and it was like a consolidation candle. So I was thinking it was going to be able to hold and continue the uptrend. Ideally, with my entry at 109.5, it doesn't break below $1, which the low point was 103. I thought it would try to maybe break VWAP and uptrend over a longer period of time. I didn't know how long I was going to hold on to it, but I was planning to get out of the trade if it was going to break below $1. And I was thinking, best case scenario, this could be like the dip before a shoulder of a head and shoulders pattern. So here's a shoulder, here's a head, and then I'm here, it holds $1. And maybe it makes a shoulder and I sell it in the 140s, and that could be pretty profitable. So that was the idea with this setup right here. And I did get out of it the next day because it did break below $1. You can also see from this chart, it was roughly support, and it's a nice round number, $1. And this thing could have continued the uptrend over a longer period of time. As you can see, it broke, so the setup failed, and I got out on the 28th. But I did sell a piece. I don't think I have it saved. At least I would have to look for it, which I don't really want to do. But I did sell a portion of my position when it was around right here. I believe at 116. When I saw that it was making some topping price action and it was starting to maybe downtrend, I did sell a portion of my position, but only 10 shares out of the 50 shares I bought. And that did help me for, my overall average sell price, because I did have to sell the other piece for a loss, as you can see right here. And it wasn't really bad that the setup failed. It was just bad because my sleep was so screwed up that I actually was very close to missing the market open substantially, and I forgot I had a position. So I allowed it to break under my risk level, which was $1, and I didn't sell immediately because I forgot I had a position. Let's go over the 28th as to when I got out. So let me just try to highlight these 2 days right here. I did sell ultimately, and this was the 28th at 10:02, and that was at this point right here, very early in the morning. But I guess I'll highlight from here. 10:02, I sold right here. And why did I sell right here? I sold the remaining piece at like 90 cents because I realized I had a position later. And then it was looking like, well, I had a sell off and everything crappy, but it looks like at the time it was trying to break above VWAP and maybe be something that could try to regain itself, and then I'll still hold on to the position. But when it looked like it was just showing like it wasn't going to get above VWAP, I did get out at 90 cents. And then, at least I did that. And it continued to sell off. And I thought, if it was going to break the day low, I was going to cut it too. So I mainly cut it because it didn't look like it was going to break above VWAP. If not, it was going to be the day low. And that was the case. So yeah, just really bad the way I traded it. I didn't have to lose that much. Worst case scenario, I sold a tenth of my position at, what was it again? 116. So I guess we'll just times it by 10. And then worst case scenario, maybe I sold the rest at 98. So, right, so then I would add 11, 6. This is all hypothetical. Maybe I could have sold at 1016, and then that wouldn't have been too bad. Because, again, the setup just didn't work out, so that's fine. And that could have had just a tiny $4 loss. And sure, I mean, you're like, okay, $4, but instead you lost 7, boohoo. I traded a very small position size. If I traded like a real size, this would have been super bad, and that would have been a lot more important. So, yeah, I just need to, whenever I have a trade, I'll probably, since it makes sense to do this, let me just provide a screenshot of one of my setups that I traded. You see how I have like this little notes section? Just in case, as a preventative, because it was worst case scenario that I almost missed the market open because of sleep issues. I think whenever I have a swing trade position, I'll just write it here in my notes section that I'm actually long a position, just so I don't not prevent, but just so I don't allow that to happen again, or at least, make it a lower possibility. With that one out of the way, let's go over the rest, which is not going to take as long to go over. Let's look at GTII on the 28th. And actually, let me make this back to this so that we don't look at so many days. 28th is going to be back here. Did it in a different order. Right here, so not very significant daily chart other than the fact that it's broken below this 187 level and we're having substantial volume. So in this case, I was looking for some kind of reversal setup. Let's look at 936. I was in at 936 at 140, and this was a morning panic bounce play tsunami. I put tsunami when a stock is down more than 20% on the day. So 936, 140. I'm going to zoom in a bit more. I was in it right here at 140. Why? Again, morning panic bounce play. I thought it was trying to turn around. I like how, had a wick right here with a whole bunch of volume. And then it was looking like it was trying to turn back around. And I'm in it at 140. I got out the same minute at 139.5. So this was a very quick in and out. And, just a tiny loss. I got out of it. So let's look at the notes why. Yeah, I've seen this happen before on a lot of morning panic bounce plays where, it looks like the bottom is in and then we're in and then it does this like really volatile one candle shoot towards VWAP. Sometimes it doesn't get to it like it did here. And then I see a lot of them just like sell right back under and keep downtrending and even break the day low. So I got out because I saw that sketchy price action and it did downtrend a bit more, but not that much more. This one kind of saved itself and did get to VWAP later, but Yeah, that's a really sketchy move. Whenever a morning panic bounce setup does that, so I got out, and I did try it again. The same setup now at a different point. I'm in at 138 at 137. So wow, 138, 938 at 137 right here is when I got in, and this was a second try. Again, maybe having this as a new kind of risk level or even the bottom of the wick, but maybe a little more security because it wasn't doing this thing which I hate, it's seeing it do. I got out at 940 at 143 right here when I got out right here. Let's go over this one. Okay, so I got out of this one just because of the fact that it got to VWAP and that was it. It did get a little higher. I mean, I got as high as the 147s, but it's kind of hard because that was probably executed at the ask and I sold at the bid, which was 140. So I think that's fine in that sense. Oh, actually, no, not 140. Wow, 143. Yeah, I don't know why I'm messing this up so badly. I'm not even that tired. I've been trying a lot to improve my sleep, but clearly something's still off. Very simple description. The setup worked, and I even had the right amount of shares. At least I can see something nice in this weekly recap. Let's look at GTII on the same day, but this was a bit later, so let me actually just zoom out a bit. Actually, no, I think this might be enough. This was now a trend line follow, reverse along towards VWAP. So let's look at 1040 at 134 and a half. 1040 was right here, and I got in at 134 and a half, I believe. Yes. So right here is when I got in. And why did I get in? I said a trend line follow and a move towards VWAP. So my idea was that I'm going to guess it was off of this level. I saw something where I could draw a trend line, something that could ideally break above VWAP or at least get towards VWAP. And I'm in it at 1040 right here, thinking that, over a longer period of time is going to keep following this trend line and it will just continue to uptrend and break above this level and try to regain itself after it's been selling off for the past few days with a significant amount of volume. Thinking that at one point it might try to bounce back and, not all the way back, but maybe it might bounce and then be a nice setup to sell into, and then maybe it could sell off some more. But I'm in it for that simple setup. I did get out at 1044 at 132-ish, so 1044 was right here at 132-ish. Yeah, I think I had an issue with this one because of the fact that this trend line I probably had a more aggressive one than this one, but I did get out because it looked like it was going to break under the trend line, and so I sold it, right? But it actually didn't break below it right here. Let me see if I can actually find the actual trade just so that I have a screenshot that supports it, because this one is still following the trend line that I made right here, but the one I had, it broke under. But it didn't work out. As you can see, it didn't get above VWAP or anything like that. It did downtrend, and it did break it right here. This would have been, if I had this trend line where it would have broken under anyway. So let's look at my notes and see if I can find it. I think this is the one I traded. Yeah, as you can see, it's very similar to this one right here. But I did sell in this case right here when it was still holding above the trend line. It did break it a few minutes later. I probably had a more aggressive trend line right here, but yeah, that was the situation. It did fail ultimately. Again, it didn't get above VWAP, but I did trade this thinking that it was trying to, do it and be a nice setup. So yeah, this one just didn't work out. There's nothing wrong with it. It just simply didn't work out. Not a bad try. And then I did trade it profitably, same setup, but actually no, this is a trendline break, not like a trendline follow. Let's look at GTII again with an entry at 1205 at 135 and a half. So 1205 is going to be a bit later. Let me zoom in a bit. Zoom out. 1205 was right here. I was in it right here at 135 and a half. Why was I in this setup? This was a reversal long trend line break. So let's see if I can try to find out where I had a trend line without looking at my notes. I think I had a trend line based off of this right here. I think I had something like this. Maybe this end was a little lower. Maybe something off of these levels right here. I think I had something like this. An overall downtrending trend line and then it breaks above it. And again, with this trend line in mind, I was in at 1205, once again at 135 and a half. So right here, so I didn't just wait for it to break above the trend line, but I waited for some confirmation, and I'm in it at 135 and a half, thinking that the overall downward momentum by this trend line that played off of these tops very nicely has broken, and it's even showing signs of it uptrending. So I entered for that reason with the goal of it getting to VWAP and above it, and this one did work out. I did get out at 1208. 142 and a half, so 1208 was this big candle, 142 and a half, so I got out right around here. I think the only thing I could have done better is that I could have had a trend line. Could you imagine another trend line to help me hold on to the position a bit longer? I just don't like it when I'm in a setup and it works, but it works too well, like it uptrends too quickly, because I feel like if the setup uptrends too quickly, it's also going to fail and downtrend quickly, like it did right here by this big red candle. So when it uptrended the way it did, I did sell immediately, but I can still probably have some kind of a trend line so that maybe I sell three quarters of my position and then I just hold on to a tiny amount in the event that it continues to follow an uptrending trend line like in this situation, and maybe I can get a sell somewhere higher like in the 147s, right? And after it shows that it's not able to break above 150, I might be able to cut it. And this seems kind of hard to cut because it just immediately broke the trend line and went all the way down here. But that's the thing in mind, and I could have traded again a smaller piece, so I could have been able to sell just a little better or maybe a little worse, but I gave myself an opportunity to sell for better. And yeah, so this one worked out in that sense. And let's just see what a sell at 144 would have been. Not too much higher than my entry. I just don't like how I sold like a little too quickly, even though the setup did uptrend too quickly. Yeah, this is a little bit different, but definitely a good setup. It worked out, and I'm glad I traded it well. And I'm glad I'm going over it because it shows me that I'm not as horrible as I feel like I am, but still, I could have done so much better. Let's look at GTII on the 29th. So another tsunami panic. You thought this was the very end? Nope. The 29th happened, even more volume, and down another 20% on the day. I think not as much as this day, but still down at least 20% on the day. And look at that nice, glorious comeback when I started to mess up and miss out on setups, unfortunately. Let's look at 1042 at 108 and a half. And this was a tsunami VWAP breakout. So let's look at 1042, 108 and a half. I'm going to zoom in a bit more. 1002 was right here. Right here, 1002. Right around here at 108. Wait, what was it? 108? Yeah, 10. Oh, 1042. Wow. 1042 right here. And 108 and a half. So I got in it right here. And why did I get in it? Well, very simple. A break above VWAP. And I like how, it broke up below VWAP significantly. This was a morning panic bounce. A little too hard to trade, I think, this one. And then it got a little bit above it, sells off, and then it got a little bit above it again, even longer than this section, and then it sells off. But then it does this nice consolidation right here, and this also gives you a really nice risk level, or at least the way I would want to trade it. Maybe something off of these levels right here. I'm sure if I, look at my screenshot, I can find a trend line like this. But essentially, I have a risk level right here. It's putting up higher lows and it's breaking above this level. and I'm in at 108.5 with this thing in mind that it's going to continue the uptrend, and I can have a nice move to sell into in the upside. I did get out at 10:43 at 112.5, so very quickly the next minutes. Um, 10:43 around right here is when I sold. Again, I didn't like how it uptrended and worked too quickly. I wanted it to, uptrend slowly but surely with more of a foundation. As you can see, when it failed, it was also just as quick as the uptrend. So again, it worked out. I just probably could have sold maybe 3/4 of my position, and then maybe I could have tried to sell the other piece better, or maybe worse, but I would have given myself more exposure to profitability. So yeah, this one worked out a little too quickly, but this was a good trade for what it was, and I did not have the right amount of shares. In this case, I should have had 200 shares, but I think this is when I was starting to feel really, really, really sick and some other things. Just a whole bunch of unlucky things happening. But this was a good trade nonetheless. Let's look at CLMV for the first day of December. After I remove this trend line, right here is the first day of December. Yeah, pretty significant downtrend right here. And actually, not to give myself too much crap, this is when I was really messed up and I did miss out on trades. Not because I wasn't like really at my best, but I just wasn't at the mark because for some other reasons I don't really want to go over. But let's go over CLMV again on the first, which is this big sell-off day. And this is the first right here. Never really offered a turnaround. As you can tell, it just sold off. I was in at 943 at 50, or I guess 5 cents. 943, 5 cents. Morning panic bounce play. Round number breakdown. So let's zoom in right here. And again, this was an entry at 943 right here. I got in it, this candle, this green candle at 5 pennies. And why did I trade this? Well, I liked it because it was selling off significantly. The previous close, was around this level right here, the 64 level, and then we, continued to sell off, and it had a little option right here, but then it kept panicking. And I thought it was going to do something with the idea in mind that it's going to break below 5 cents, cause big max panic like it did right here, big huge panic. People thinking this is worst case scenario, and then I thought it was going to, get a little bit below 5 cents and then try to regain itself like it was doing in this green candle. And then it was going to uptrend and then continue the uptrend and be a nice bounce to sell into. And as you can tell, this setup did not work out. I got out 944 at 49.6. 944 was right here, 49.6. This was a very good sell. Essentially, I didn't wait for this to break the day low, which was right here, but I sold very quickly because after I entered, the level 2 price action looked mega sketchy. It gave off big vibes that it was going to potentially break the day low and continue to sell, even lower than what it ultimately ended up doing. And I did cut it for that reason. It didn't try to trade around that 5 cent level, but it did do something where it kind of broke under it, created volume, and then try to show where it could try to do the thing I was talking about, and then they just dump it. So I'm glad I cut it for that reason. As tricky as they want to trade these things, the level 2 for the most part does not lie. Let's look at the next trade, which is GTII on the first. First is going to be right here. Yeah, after this day, the 30th, I just did not trade that day. I was pretty messed up that day. I just wasn't able to trade. Not feeling my best that day. I was in at 10:07, 119.5. Morning panic bounce play, VWAP breakout. So I traded a very similar setup that worked out. This is now another one. 10:07 at 119.5. 10:07 was right here, 119.5. So I got in it right here. Not as nice as the other one, but still, it had a nice sell off under VWAP right here. Starting to put a bit of a higher low situation again. Very similar, and then I can also draw a trend line off of this level right here. like that. And then I can extend this to the right, and that could be a risk level. Not just a flat out number like this, but maybe something that, maybe will get you out of the trade when it's still going to work out, but it's more reliable in most situations. I got out at 10.16 at 119, so a very small difference. 10.16. I don't know if I cut it because it broke under the trend line, but let's take a look. I did sell at 119. Oh no, I think I did get out of this one because it was holding around this 119 level, and then I sold at 10.16 when it was breaking below this 119 support level, but I still managed to sell at 119. I think that was the situation. Yeah, I didn't like the price action. Good try. Just didn't work out. Lost $1. Boohoo, cry a river. Not all setups are gonna work. Let's look at GTII on the same day. Inverse head and shoulders, 1023. I was in at 117, so 1023 was right here at 117. Inverse head and shoulders. Let's try to find that. Shoulder, head, and then maybe this was a shoulder right here. Not really the best setup, but maybe it's because it's a bit stretched out. Let's see if I can find the same setup in my screenshots to see how it looked. Okay, yeah, this looked a little more like an inverse head and shoulders, although still kind of far. The right shoulder is kind of far from the left shoulder. Maybe that was just me trying to find setups to jump into after I missed the 30th that had plenty of setups with GTII. So shoulder, head, and then I'm trading the shoulder in theory. And I was in at 1023 again at 117. I got out at 1026, 114.6 and a half. So yeah, this chart just looks weird because it's stretched out, but 1026 was right here when I got out at this 114-ish level. So the shoulder didn't work out, shoulder, head, and then the shoulder. And I could have done better with this one. I thought this thing was going to hard-headedly keep hitting the ask and just uptrend and get to VWAP. And when it wasn't showing that price action, when it was showing topping price action, I think I should have just cut the trade right then and there because I didn't really see much support at the bid, but I've seen setups like CRTD, GTII uptrend just because of the fact that they do have like a lot of people just hitting the ask, and I thought this was going to do that. So when it wasn't showing that price action, I probably should have cut it, and that would have allowed me to have not have had to have sold when it was starting to sell off. With some slippage, and I would have lost less money. I think that's why I could have traded this one better. And now let's look at the last trade, which I traded horribly, absolutely horribly. It prevented me from trading anything else that day because I didn't want a revenge trade or do something stupid. Let's look at LKNCY on the second, and this is, oh, this was a bad one. So, all right, I think I'll actually show most of this chart right here, but as you can see, a nice breakout over the round number of $20. Super nice breakouts. Super nice move. I traded this one horribly, but at least the chances that I'll screw up this badly is not as high. I was in at 946. Wow, I'm not used to trading stuff this expensive, which is something I'm going to have to go over. 946.40. I was in at 1997 and a half, and this was a multi-day breakouts. So 946 was right here. 946 right here is when I entered, and I got in at 1997. And the idea was is that it was going to break above $20, and I thought it was a bit of a newbie setup. Like, oh yeah, it's just gonna break the round number of $20 and shoot towards the moon, and all this craziness, euphoria. But then I was thinking, this is a very, very, very popular stock for short sellers. Considering the fact that it is an OTC, it's still a very popular stock to trade and short because it is a high-priced OTC. So I did trade this, and I thought, it might not work to breakout, but actually, if this thing is as shorted as it is, considering the fact that even Schwab has shares available to short, I thought it could actually break $20 and really uptrend, not just because of buyers, breakout buyers, but short sellers just getting squeezed, like not expecting it to really break out. And I think I had a mini risk level of 1994, and it did actually drop to that level. I never broke under it, so I would have been fine. But as you can see for yourself, it really just uptrended, and it was nice. I did get out the next minute at 20:07 and a half, so 9:47 was right here, the first blip. Again, I don't mind this sell right here because, it could have been a situation where it just blips above $20, sucks in a bunch of buyers and, weak-handed short sellers. A lot of volume gets executed like it did right here. And then it just sells off. And then, just trapped a bunch of people into being a bag holder. And then a bunch of short sellers are, slamming their hands and breaking their monitors because it just got out of their position only to see a uptrend, not uptrend, but downtrend the next minute. But I just made the mistake of selling all of my position instead of just half of my position. And then on top of that, because this thing was so expensive, I was thinking that I had the right amount of shares, but I was supposed to have 50 shares. And as you can see, that's a $50 risk level. I didn't want to trade 100 shares because I thought that this thing has a little bit of a spread, so if it's not going to work in my favor, there's going to be a little bit more slippage than what I would be comfortable with. So I decided to trade just 50 shares, half of it. But then because my math was screwed up, not expecting to trade $1,000 position, I only traded 5 shares. So I did two things horribly wrong. One, I had the wrong amount of shares, and number two, I sold all of my position instead of just half of my position. In theory, I should have just have sold half of my position, maybe 2 or 3 shares, well, 20 or 30 shares if I had the right amount of shares, and then I could have sold the other half. I had two very nice trend lines, and I like how I went over it before, it uptrended because it just shows that I'm not making stuff up. I had a trend line right here, a very slow trend line. This one actually doesn't show the end of this trend line right here. Then I had this aggressive trend line. I could have had a very nice sell roughly around the same level in the high $20 level off of these two trend lines. And if you want to see this beautiful setup that I hope I can trade in the future and not screw up as badly, whether it's LKNCY or some other OTC or even a listed stock. I mean, if I see a setup like this again, I hope I don't do actually, I hope I don't actually trade it worse than this time. I don't think it's possible. So, yeah, look at the trade I had on the second, the video I published on the second, the last video of the first week of December. Super nice setup, and it got to the 21s. We're talking about the 20s right here, but I wanted to really held towards the 21s. Really profitable setup. This is something also because of the way it trades and the volume it trades. This is a setup that I could trade 10,000 shares if I'm lucky enough to be able to not completely lose my mind and keep trading. So yeah, that's it for this weekly recap right here. I just have to keep going. I'm glad I saw some setups that I traded here that wasn't garbage. Like I did well and the setup worked out because I felt like I just didn't trade anything that worked. Properly. Just that the setups that didn't work out, I traded properly. But no, there were actually some setups that I did well. Yeah, definitely need to keep working on my sleep. I did get some like melatonin, so when I feel like I'm not gonna be able to sleep anytime soon, I can just take one of those and help me go to sleep. I'm not gonna try to be dependent on it because it's never good to be dependent on something that's not natural. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So just glad to see that I wasn't that horrible. I still managed to crack a whopping profit, but definitely, let's just make it up. Let's just see what would have happened if I were to have sold, half of my position where I did at 20:07, and then the other one would have been at let's just say 20:43. So 20:07 plus 20:43. That will be an average of 20:25. Let's see what would have happened if I sold at 20. Again, kind of giving myself, not like best case scenario, somewhere in the middle. And then I could have traded 10,000 shares because it would have been possible. I think, let me just make sure, since this is going to be, yeah, I mean, this thing traded on, this candle right here. The volume, is there something here that can tell me the volume right here? I guess not really. I 77,000, so it would have been possible to trade 10,000 shares, or at least 7,000 shares, which is 10%. This candle especially had, 200,000 shares. So yeah, it would have been possible to trade 10,000 shares here. And, with a sell that's not even that well, let's see what the position size would have been. Okay, that would have been huge position size, at least to me. I'm sure some people doesn't really consider it to be so. And then with a not so good sell at 2025, because if I was a big baller, I guess if I'm gonna bet that much size, I'm gonna sell better. Let's see a sell at 2046. I need to do this just so I can feel better. 20, and because it could have actually happened. This isn't completely la la land. Yeah, a $10,000 risk level, and it would have made just about 5 grand. And again, this thing got to 21, but I wouldn't have held that long. But I guess let's see a little bit impossible case scenario, $10,000. So yeah, a long way to go from 50 cents. But yeah, that's it for this weekly recap. It actually wasn't as bad as I thought. I did miss out on some setups just because I wasn't well in terms of health and sleep and a few other things. But I'm definitely way better now and thankful for God. That's it for this weekly recap right here. I'm going to actually close it right here.